July 28, 1944, 2:30 in the afternoon. American Sherman tanks burst through the smoking ruins of German defensive lines near Marigny, France. Within 72 hours, entire Wehrmacht divisions that had held the Allies at bay for 7 weeks were fleeing in complete disorder. The impenetrable hedgerow fortress that Hitler called his Atlantic Wall had shattered like glass. Consider this shocking statistic. In just 5 days, American forces advanced further than they had in the previous 50. German casualties exceeded 30,000 men. 10,000 vehicles lay burning on Norman roads. The Panzer Lehr division, Hitler's elite armored unit that had terrorized Allied forces since D-Day, simply ceased to exist as a fighting force. Its commander, General Fritz Bayerlein, radioed desperately to headquarters. "The front has burst. There is no more defensive line." How did the United States First Army, bloodied and exhausted after weeks of brutal hedgerow fighting, suddenly transform into an unstoppable juggernaut that crushed Hitler's Western defenses in less time than it takes most Americans to plan a vacation? How did soldiers who were gaining mere yards per day suddenly find themselves racing 30 miles in an afternoon? The answer lies in one of the most audacious military operations in American history. Operation Cobra wasn't just another offensive. It was a masterclass in deception, innovation, and raw American determination that would rewrite the rules of modern warfare. What the Germans never saw coming was how 3,000 American aircraft, 7 infantry divisions, and 3 armored divisions had been positioned for a knockout blow that would change the course of World War II. To understand this astonishing transformation from stalemate to breakthrough, we must first examine why the Germans believed their Norman defenses were impregnable, and why that confidence would prove to be their fatal mistake. The German commanders surveying their positions in Normandy that July had every reason for confidence. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, commanding Army Group B, controlled a defensive masterpiece that had frustrated Allied advances for 7 grueling weeks. His forces included some of the Wehrmacht's most formidable units: the battle-hardened Panzer Lehr Division, the fanatical 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, and the elite 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, Götz von Berlichingen. These weren't conscripts or second-rate garrison troops. These were veterans who had fought from Russia to North Africa. The Normand bocage country gave them every advantage. Ancient hedgerows, some dating back to Roman times, created a maze of natural fortifications. Each field became a potential killing zone. Each sunken road could hide anti-tank guns. German doctrine called it elastic defense, and it had worked perfectly. Official Wehrmacht records from July 20th show LXA-4 Corps Commander General Dietrich von Choltitz reporting, "The Americans bleed for every hedgerow. At this rate, they will not reach Paris before winter." German intelligence assessments reinforced this confidence. Intercepted Allied communications revealed frustration and mounting casualties. The Americans were losing 100 men for every 100 yards gained in some sectors. Panzer Lehr's operations officer noted in his war diary, "The enemy's material superiority is negated by terrain. Our defensive positions remain intact despite constant bombardment." Hitler himself had issued Directive 65, declaring, "Every man shall fight and fall where he stands rather than withdraw." But his generals weren't planning to fall. They were planning to hold, then counterattack. The 2nd Panzer Division was already moving into reserve positions for a massive counterstroke. German commanders believed they had identified the pattern. Americans would bomb, push forward with tanks, get tangled in hedgerows, and then retreat under withering fire. What they couldn't see from their fortified positions was that American commanders had spent 3 weeks studying every failed attack, every costly lesson. Behind the apparent stalemate, a revolutionary plan was taking shape. The Germans expected another frontal assault into their killing fields. They had prepared for everything except what was actually coming. An operation so concentrated, so violent, and so precisely orchestrated that it would tear a hole in their lines too large to seal. By mid-July 1944, the American First Army was a force on the edge of exhaustion. Official casualty reports showed 40,000 men lost since D-Day, with some rifle companies operating at 50% strength. The hedgerow fighting had devoured men and machines at an alarming rate. Tank losses exceeded 600 vehicles. Artillery ammunition expenditure had reached critical levels, with some batteries rationed to 25 rounds per day. General Omar Bradley's situation reports painted a grim picture. His troops had advanced just 7 miles in 17 days. The British press was openly questioning American fighting capability. Even Allied Supreme Commander Eisenhower privately worried about a stalemate reminiscent of World War I's trenches. A captured letter from a soldier in the 29th Infantry Division summed up the mood. "We measure progress in hedgerows, not miles. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever break out of this green hell." The statistics were sobering. German defenders enjoyed a 3-to-1 advantage in defensive terrain. American Sherman tanks, designed for mobility, were vulnerable to German anti-tank weapons at any range. The Wehrmacht's 88mm guns could destroy Shermans at 2,000 yards, while American 75mm guns needed to close within 500 yards to penetrate German armor. Reconnaissance reported that Germans had turned every farmhouse into a strong point, every orchard into a death trap. Supply problems compounded tactical frustrations. Everything had to flow through temporary ports and across beaches. A single infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily. Traffic jams on narrow Norman roads meant critical ammunition and fuel often arrived late or not at all. One logistics officer calculated that at current consumption rates versus supply capacity, major offensive operations would become impossible by August. Yet, behind this facade of struggle, American planners were quietly assembling something unprecedented. They had learned from every bloody mistake. They had studied every failed assault. What looked like stagnation was actually preparation. The Germans saw tired, bloody divisions barely holding their ground. They didn't see the 3,000 aircraft being positioned, the ammunition dumps being stockpiled, or the innovative tactics being rehearsed. The American force that appeared beaten down was actually coiling like a spring, ready to unleash energy that would shatter German certainty forever. Behind the curtain of apparent stalemate, American planners were orchestrating something unprecedented in military history. Operation Cobra represented a complete reimagining of combined arms warfare. General Omar Bradley and his staff had spent 3 weeks analyzing every failed attack, transforming bitter lessons into revolutionary doctrine. The plan they developed would concentrate more firepower on a smaller area than any operation in the European theater. The mathematics were staggering. Bradley planned to saturate a rectangle just 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep, with 3,500 tons of bombs. That meant 1 ton of explosives for every 6 square yards of German-held territory. Artillery would add another 1,000 tons of shells in the first hour alone. The Air Force committed 1,500 heavy bombers, 300 medium bombers, and 700 fighter bombers. This wasn't just bombardment, it was deliberate annihilation. But raw firepower was only part of the innovation. American engineers had developed Rhino tanks, Shermans equipped with steel tusks welded from German beach obstacles. These could tear through hedgerows instead of climbing over them, eliminating the deadly exposure that had cost so many crews. Sergeant Curtis Cullen's field modification had been tested, refined, and secretly fitted to 600 tanks. The Germans expected Shermans to appear predictably at hedgerow gaps. Instead, they would burst through the hedgerows themselves.
The tactical plan revolutionized coordination. Unlike previous operations where units advanced on broad fronts, Cobra would punch a narrow corridor with concentrated force. 3 infantry divisions would attack on a front of just 4 miles, followed immediately by 3 armored divisions tasked with deep exploitation. Radio frequencies were synchronized so forward air controllers could direct fighter bombers onto targets within minutes. Artillery observers were assigned to tank units to provide rolling barrages. Intelligence played a crucial role. Ultra-intercepts revealed German fuel shortages and ammunition constraints. Aerial reconnaissance identified every German strongpoint in the target sector. Most critically, American deception operations convinced German intelligence that the main effort would come near Caen, in the British sector. The First Army conducted fake radio traffic, visible tank movements, and artillery registrations to sell the deception. Supply officers had secretly stockpiled 120,000 artillery shells, 17,000 tons of ammunition, and enough fuel for a 200-mile advance. Medical units prepared 25,000 beds for expected casualties. Every detail was calculated, rehearsed, and verified. On July 20th, Bradley issued the final operational order. The attacking divisions moved into position under cover of darkness. Fighter bombers flew continuous missions to prevent German reconnaissance. The American military machine that had seemed stalled was actually a loaded weapon, cocked and aimed at a single point in the German line. The enemy had no idea what was about to hit them. The execution of Operation Cobra required surgical precision in positioning 6 divisions and supporting elements without alerting German intelligence. Beginning July 20th, American forces initiated a carefully choreographed dance of deception and movement. The 7th Corps, commanded by General J. Lawton Collins, would deliver the main blow with the 9th, 4th, and 30th Infantry Divisions in the assault echelon, backed by the 1st Infantry Division and 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions ready to exploit any breakthrough. Under cover of darkness, artillery batteries displaced forward to pre-surveyed positions. The 258th Field Artillery Battalion alone moved 36 howitzers into range. Each gun allocated 1,000 rounds for the opening barrage. Engineers marked approach routes with infrared lights visible only through special scopes. Military police controlled every crossroad to prevent traffic jams that might alert German observers. Radio operators maintained normal message traffic from false positions, while assault units observed radio silence. German intelligence completely misread American intentions. On July 23rd, LXIV Corps reported, "Enemy activity remains normal in the Saint-Lô sector. Expected attack will likely come near Caumont." They had identified increased American activity but interpreted it as reinforcement of defensive positions. Aerial reconnaissance by the Luftwaffe was virtually impossible. American fighters shot down 17 German reconnaissance aircraft in 3 days.
Weather became a critical factor. The operation required clear skies for the massive aerial bombardment. On July 24th, bombers took off despite marginal conditions. When clouds obscured target markers, disaster struck. Bombs fell short, killing 25 Americans, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. Bradley nearly canceled the operation, but meteorologists promised perfect conditions for July 25th. Bradley made the difficult decision to proceed. At midnight on July 24th, assault troops moved into final positions. The 4th Infantry Division soldiers crept forward to within 1,200 yards of German lines, lying prone in ditches and shell holes. Tank crews conducted final maintenance checks on their Rhino-equipped Shermans. Forward air controllers verified radio frequencies with fighter-bomber squadrons. Artillery observers synchronized their watches. As dawn approached on July 25th, 2,500 German defenders of the Panzer Lehr Division and 5th Parachute Division manned their positions, unaware they were about to experience the full weight of American military power. Their routine morning reports noted nothing unusual. One German lieutenant wrote in his diary, "Another quiet night. The Americans seem to have given up." Within hours, his entire regiment would cease to exist. The stage was set for one of the most devastating tactical strikes in military history.
At 9:38 hours, July 25th, the sky over Saint-Lô turned dark with aircraft. First came the heavies, B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, flying in box formations at 15,000 feet. German troops looked up in disbelief as 1,500 bombers filled the horizon. Panzer Lehr's General Fritz Bayerlein later testified, "It was as if the world was coming to an end." The first wave dropped fragmentation bombs to kill exposed troops. The second delivered high explosives to crush bunkers. The third scattered white phosphorus to burn and blind. In 60 minutes, 3,500 tons of ordnance obliterated a 3-square-mile rectangle. The 91st Panzer Grenadier Regiment simply vanished. 70% of its men were dead, wounded, or buried alive. Bayerlein emerged from his command bunker to find his communications destroyed, his artillery silent, and his forward positions transformed into a moonscape. At 1100 hours, American artillery joined the symphony of destruction. 700 guns fired simultaneously, adding 4 shells per second to the inferno. Forward observer Lieutenant James Eads reported, "The entire German line disappeared under smoke and flame. Nothing could survive that hell." Then came the ground assault. The 4th Infantry Division attacked first, expecting fierce resistance. Instead, they found dazed Germans stumbling from collapsed bunkers, blood streaming from burst eardrums. Many surrendered immediately. Others wandered aimlessly, psychologically shattered. Sergeant William Bowen of the 8th Infantry Regiment recalled, "We walked through their lines like they weren't there. Some Germans just sat on the ground crying."
By noon, American infantry had penetrated 2 miles. Collins immediately released his armor. The 2nd Armored Division's Combat Command A thundered forward, Rhino tanks smashing through hedgerows at 30 miles per hour. German anti-tank guns, positioned to cover roads and gaps, couldn't traverse fast enough to engage tanks appearing from unexpected directions. Within 3 hours, American armor had advanced 5 miles. The German command structure disintegrated. Radio networks were destroyed. Telephone lines were cut. Commanders couldn't locate their units. The 353rd Infantry Division commander radioed frantically. "Front broken, troops flooding rear, cannot establish new line." Panzer Lehr tried organizing a counterattack with its remaining tanks. Firebombers destroyed them in minutes. P-47 Thunderbolts fired rockets and dropped napalm on anything that moved. German soldiers abandoned vehicles and fled on foot.
By evening, the breakthrough was undeniable. The 1st Infantry Division and 3rd Armored Division poured through the gap. General Collins reported to Bradley, "This thing has busted wide open." The supposedly impregnable German defensive line had collapsed in 8 hours. American forces had advanced further in 1 day than in the previous month. As darkness fell, German Corps Commander von Schultitz sent his final coherent message. "Front shattered, no reserves, cannot hold." The Wehrmacht's Western Front hadn't just been penetrated, it had been obliterated. American armored spearheads were already racing into open country, with nothing but scattered remnants between them and Paris. The decisive moment had arrived, and it belonged entirely to American arms. The German collapse was total and unprecedented. Field Marshal von Kluge's evening report to Hitler on July 26 read, "The front is broken. The enemy is pouring through like water through a burst dam." This wasn't tactical withdrawal, it was complete disintegration. Communications intercepted by Ultra revealed panic at every command level. One divisional commander radioed, "My unit has ceased to exist. I have no idea where my men are." Captured German documents painted a picture of absolute chaos. The war diary of the 353rd Infantry Division recorded, "Massive bombardment has destroyed all communications. Cannot contact adjacent units. Soldiers abandoning positions without orders." Major Joachim Barth of the 77th Infantry Division, captured near Marghi, told interrogators, "We had survived Russian artillery, but this was beyond comprehension. The earth itself seemed to explode. My battalion of 800 men simply disappeared." The psychological impact was devastating. German soldiers who had fought confidently for weeks now fled in terror. A captured lieutenant from the 5th Parachute Division stated, "The bombardment broke our will. Men who had never retreated were running. Veterans were crying. We knew the war was lost." American intelligence officers reported capturing Germans who had thrown away weapons, equipment, even boots in their desperation to escape. Physical evidence of the rout littered Norman roads. The 2nd Armored Division's after-action report documented
enemy vehicles abandoned with engines running, supply dumps intact and undefended, artillery pieces left loaded but unmanned. Near Rancé, fighter-bombers caught a German column attempting to retreat. 2,000 vehicles were destroyed in what became known as the Rancé Pocket. A P-47 pilot reported they were packed bumper to bumper for 2 miles. It was a turkey shoot.
German commanders lost all situational awareness. General Hausser of 7th Army admitted, "For 48 hours I had no idea where my divisions were." The Panzer Lehr division, which had entered battle with 2,200 men and 90 tanks, reported combat strength of 300 men and no operational armor. Its proud history as an elite demonstration unit had ended in complete annihilation. Wehrmacht morale collapsed entirely. Military police reported thousands of soldiers surrendering without resistance. An intercepted message from 2nd Parachute Corps revealed, "Troops refuse orders to counterattack. Officers cannot restore discipline." The German army that had conquered France in 6 weeks was now fleeing in complete disorder. The hedgerow fortress that had seemed impregnable just days before had become a highway for American armor racing toward the German border. The collapse of German defenses triggered a cascade of strategic consequences that reshaped the entire Western Front. On August 1, 1944, General George S. Patton's Third Army became operational, exploiting the breach with characteristic aggression. His armored columns raced through the gap at unprecedented speed. Within 48 hours, advance elements had captured Avranches, the gateway to Brittany and central France. The static warfare that had characterized Normandy for 7 weeks transformed overnight into a war of movement.
The statistics of liberation were staggering. In the first week of August alone, American forces liberated more French territory than in the previous 2 months combined. The 4th Armored Division covered 100 miles in 4 days. Towns that German planners expected to hold for weeks fell in hours. Rennes, capital of Brittany, fell on August 4th. By August 6th, American units had reached Brest on the Atlantic coast. The Wehrmacht's carefully constructed defensive lines had become meaningless marks on outdated maps. Material losses crippled German operational capacity permanently. Intelligence officers tallied the captured equipment: over 500 tanks and assault guns, 2,000 vehicles, 400 artillery pieces. More critically, the Germans lost irreplaceable veteran crews and trained operators. The 2nd Panzer Division, once an elite formation, reported combat effectiveness at 15%. Entire logistics networks collapsed. Fuel depots, ammunition dumps, and supply centers fell intact into American hands. The prisoner count revealed the magnitude of German defeat. By August 10th, American forces had captured 41,000 German soldiers. Many surrendered without fighting, their will broken by the speed of American advance. Interrogation reports showed widespread defeatism. A captured colonel from the 91st Infantry Division stated, "We knew after Cobra that Germany had lost the war. It was no longer about victory, only survival." Strategic implications extended beyond the immediate battlefield. Hitler's ability to shift reserves evaporated. With Soviet Operation Bagration devastating Army Group Center on the Eastern Front simultaneously, Germany faced catastrophic pressure on multiple fronts. Field Marshal von Kluge reported to Hitler, The Western Front has torn open. No reserves exist to close the breach.
Most significantly, Cobra had unleashed American operational mobility. The Breakout transformed the U.S. Army from a force grinding through hedgerows into a mechanized juggernaut racing across France. Paris, which German planners believed could hold until winter, would fall within 3 weeks. The port of Marseille would be liberated by month's end. What began as a tactical breakthrough had become a strategic revolution that would carry American forces to the German border by September. Operation Cobra fundamentally transformed modern military doctrine and remains one of the most studied operations in professional military education worldwide. Its success crystallized the American approach to warfare: overwhelming firepower, superior logistics, and aggressive exploitation of breakthrough. Military historians consider it the moment when the U.S. Army truly came of age as a mechanized force capable of conducting deep operational warfare on par or exceeding German blitzkrieg tactics. The operation revolutionized combined arms integration. Never before had air power, artillery, armor, and infantry been so precisely coordinated at such scale. The Air Force delivered 3,500 tons of bombs with unprecedented accuracy. Artillery fired on pre-planned schedules, synchronized to the minute. Armor exploited breakthroughs within hours, not days. This orchestration became the template for American military operations for decades. The Army's Field Manual 100-5, the cornerstone of operational doctrine, cites Cobra as the exemplar of synchronized battlefield effects. Cobra validated American industrial and logistical superiority as decisive factors in modern warfare. The ability to mass-produce Rhino tanks, stockpile massive ammunition reserves, and sustain rapid advances through revolutionary supply methods proved that industrial capacity could translate directly into battlefield dominance. German General Heinz Guderian later admitted, "We were not merely outfought, we were outproduced and outsupplied on a scale we never imagined possible." The operation's influence extends into contemporary military education. At West Point, the Command and General Staff College, and war colleges worldwide, Cobra serves as a masterclass in operational art. Officers study Bradley's planning, Collins's execution, and Patton's exploitation as textbook examples of converting tactical success into strategic victory. The operation demonstrates timeless principles: concentration of force, combined arms synchronization, and maintaining operational tempo. Historical debates continue regarding Cobra's costs and controversies. The friendly fire incidents of July 24th and 25th killed 111 Americans, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair. Some historians argue the bombing was excessive, that breakthrough might have been achieved with less destruction. Others contend that only such overwhelming force could have shattered German morale so completely. These debates themselves provide valuable lessons about the friction and tragedy inherent in warfare. Culturally, Cobra entered American military mythology as proof of American ingenuity overcoming European military tradition. The Rhino tank modification, invented by Sergeant Curtis Cullen, symbolized American practical problem-solving. Hollywood films, documentaries, and countless books have portrayed the operation as the moment American military might truly arrived on the world stage. Modern military planners still reference Cobra when designing operations requiring breakthrough and exploitation. During Desert Storm,
coalition planners explicitly cited Cobra as inspiration for the left hook through Iraq. In Afghanistan and Iraq, commanders studied Cobra's lessons about transitioning from breakthrough to pursuit operations. The operations DNA exists in every major American military success since 1944. Cobra didn't just break German lines. It broke old concepts of warfare and forged the modern American way of war. Operation Cobra stands as irrefutable proof that strategic patience, meticulous planning, and concentrated violence can transform military stalemate into decisive victory. In just 5 days, American forces shattered defensive lines that had held for 7 weeks. The same German divisions that had bloodied Allied forces in the hedgerows fled in complete disorder. What seemed impossible in early July became inevitable by August. The numbers tell only part of the story. Yes, 30,000 German casualties. Yes, entire divisions annihilated. Yes, the liberation of France accelerated by months. But Cobra's true significance lies deeper. It proved that American military innovation, industrial might, and soldier courage could defeat the Wehrmacht at its own game. The German army that had perfected blitzkrieg was itself blitzkrieged by American forces they had dismissed as inexperienced. Every element converged perfectly. Bradley's planning genius, Collins' aggressive execution, Patton's relentless exploitation, the unnamed sergeant who invented rhino tanks, the pilots who flew through flak to deliver precision strikes, the infantry who walked through hell to breach German lines, the tankers who raced through France. Together, they achieved what seemed impossible: complete operational surprise against an experienced, entrenched enemy. Operation Cobra teaches timeless lessons. That technological innovation can overcome tactical disadvantage. That concentrated force trumps dispersed strength. That bold action, properly planned and violently executed, can achieve strategic miracles. These principles guide American military doctrine today. When modern commanders face seemingly impossible odds, they study Cobra and remember: audacity, backed by firepower and logistics, can shatter any defense. But perhaps Cobra's greatest legacy is human. It reminds us that ordinary Americans, properly led and equipped, can achieve extraordinary victories. The soldiers who broke through at Setlo weren't professional warriors with decades of experience. They were citizens who answered their nation's call. Their victory belongs not just to military history, but to American history. Want to explore more untold stories of American military genius? Check the description for detailed source materials and primary documents. Comment below: what World War II operation amazes you most? Subscribe and hit the notification bell for next week's episode: Patton's Ghost Army, How America Faked an Entire Army Group. Because in war, as Cobra proved, American ingenuity always finds a way.